My name is Rita Eminette. I'm the owner and creative director of Eminette Design Studios, which is an interior design business. And I joined this group through Lamar, like many of you, and it was an opportunity to join a group that was very, very outside of the interior design and architecture industry. And when I found out this group was mostly, had a predominant amount of folks who have a military background of some sort, I asked, could we learn, for those of us who don't have that, could we learn more? And I said, is 4th of July week a good week to have something that shared stories, learned more? And in my time of being kind of a professional, you start realizing as adults, sometimes things are not celebrated. We still have some things to kind of overcome when it comes to life achievements and celebrating the right things. And sometimes the military has not been celebrated and appreciated. And I thought, what a great opportunity to kind of have a day of Coffee Connect set aside. So for those of you who have done military service or government work in some way, can share a story that was meaningful to you. We came up with a small collection of perhaps topics that I'm going to share with all of you now, to see, kind of share with you now to kind of gauge, wet your whistle to see if there's anything there. You don't have to have done military service. Maybe it's a veteran you remember the most. Maybe it's a memorable 4th of July. Some of these are lighter than others. But we wanted to share something that really solidified an opportunity for everyone to share and talk and purposely, so that we can get to know each other better, but more importantly, kind of remind ourselves about this week of the 4th of July and the birthday of our country, and show some appreciation for those of you who have done service. Lamar, would you like to share anything?
I think, first of all, everybody has different experiences, whether they served or whether they had a family member that served, maybe a father or mother. And I say that because there are lots of women now that are serving our country or have served our country. And we thought this would be an opportunity for people to share. Now, I'm on my phone. I'm having computer difficulty. So how many people do we have right now, Rita, that are actually here?
I have 17.
17. All right. So much for my idea of everyone sharing their story with the whole group. It would take an hour and a half. All right. I'm going to recommend then that everybody takes a look at these 7 items. And then what we're going to do is, with your help, Rita, and Rodney's help, go into breakout rooms and pick one that you would like to talk about. Well, actually, pick 2 you'd like to talk about in the first breakout room. Discuss. Maybe you only have time for one, but you'll be in a breakout room for about 10 minutes, let's say 8 minutes. And then when you come out, we'll ask you to share a couple of stories, and then we'll go back to a second breakout room to talk about the other ones. Okay? There are no right or wrong answers. Which one you have is pick the 1 or 2 that you have personal stories that you'd like to share with others. And I have no technical competence here, so is there a way to
I'm working on it, I promise.
No, but I mean, is there a way to put this into the breakout room? Maybe people could take a picture of these 7 items.
Little screenshot.
We can do what we did last week, right? We can just say, hey, just like in the order that she has there on her screen, guys, Number one being what was your most memorable 4th of July? And number 7 being how can civilians support those sacrificing for freedom? Right. So let's do this. Let's use rooms 1 through 7, right, to basically represent those specific types of stories that we're looking to share. And then folks can kind of choose, pick and choose which breakout room they want to go to. Does that sound good, Lamar?
Sure, we could go to 7. I don't know how to do it, but we could go to 7.
Well, I've got 7 generated. If you guys are ready to go, I will open them up, and then everyone should be able to pick which room they want to go to. Again, 1 being, Rita, can you read those off? 1 being, I'm trying to get my camera.
Yeah, so number 1 would be what was your most memorable 4th of July? Number 2 would be what veteran do you remember most? Number 3 is how has military service impacted your life, professionally, ? Share a time when meeting active duty or veterans impacted you. Share a funny story of military or first responder life. Have you done overseas service? What was that like and did it change you? And then finally, how can civilians support those sacrificing for freedom?
Now, if you do 7 rooms, you're only going to have at most 2 people per room. And if you have people picking, you're going to have some that are empty and some that have 4 or 5.
Okay, so for the first breakout, we're going to do 1 through 4. Ha ha ha, Andy.
There you go.
Okay.
That's the smart guy. That's why I got him with me. See, so
This is the engineer coming out, Rodney.
so breakout rooms. We're going to do 1 through 4, right? And we're going to represent stories 1 through 4. Pick which one you want to which one you want to go to. I went ahead and opened up all of those rooms, and then everyone should be able to pick what room they want to go to.
Thank you so much for that breakout session, friends. That was really informative. I know that takes vulnerability to kind of share your thoughts and feelings on some of those things. Let's see. We did not get Rodney back. Oh, okay. Okay. Woo. Does anyone want to share briefly anything from their breakout sessions that maybe the larger group might want to experience a little bit? I know that I was in group 3. Jeremiah was sharing a little bit about the difference between, military life and the focus on thinking about the group and achieving a group goal versus, kind of joining the rest of the adult world. And some of us who have not had that military service tend to be a little more self-focused and self-focused on just their path and maybe not the greater goal when it comes to achieving work and getting to the next level. Did anything come out of groups 1, 2, or 4?
So in 4, it was just me and Marite, but and that was it was to share the moment that was probably most impactful on our military career, right? And I think we all have moments, right? Whether it be I said when the space shuttle blew up, or when Reagan was shot, and for some of us maybe even when Kennedy was shot, right? We're never going to forget where we were, what we were doing, all the things, right? Well, 9/11 was that day.
9/11, yeah.
Right. And for me, not just in being in the Navy, right? I mean, 9/11 is my birthday.
Ooh.
Right? I had literally just gotten off the phone with my wife to get a happy birthday wish as I walked down into the berthing area to hear these guys talk about this plane that just hit the World Trade Center. And I literally called bullshit on him, right? I'm like, man, that's got to be a movie or something they're advertising, right? Until the second plane hit, as I turned to all my guys and I said, listen, guys, we were on our way home. We just left the Arabian Gulf on September 10th. And we were supposed to be going to Cape Town, South Africa on September 15th. And right, so we were halfway down the coast of Africa, and I said, we ain't going home. All right, we turned around, and on September 12th, we were off the coast of Afghanistan, waiting for whatever orders there were to be carried out, right? And so forever, that will definitely be what I feel was one of the defining moments in my military career, on top of the fact that was the same year that I made Chief Petty Officer, right? And so there was a lot going on there. So we're all going to remember those times, though.
Rodney, I'd like to add one comment. And many of the members here were not alive, but in 1970, when I was reassigned to go to graduate school at the University of Illinois, and I was flying back from Germany, and there were soldiers in the airport, and people were spitting on them, challenging them, because the military, quite frankly, was being blamed for Vietnam. And I called my assignment officer and said, do I have to wear my uniform when I go to school? I wanted to represent my country, but I really wanted to be a student. And he said, no, you don't. But I'm so pleased now to see that when people see veterans, regardless of the date, when people see veterans in an airport, they go up and say, thank you for your service. We've come a long way since 1970. Greg, how about Jeff, how about talking about Group 1?
Sure. Jeff 1 is shaking his head. All right, fair enough. No, I had a great breakout room with Lamar and Jeff GPT. Excuse me. I don't have a specific 4th of July that stands out as the best of the best, but growing up, we'd go to my grandma's every 4th of July in Brookfield, Wisconsin. A lot of relatives would come in for it, and I was telling the guys, my Aunt Sally, who's sweet as pie, little eccentric, she's very patriotic. She would actually run in my grandma's front yard. We'd have the flag hanging. She would actually run probably 30-minute, 45-minute 4th of July ceremony. And as a kid, I'm sitting there giggling. I'm thinking, this is silly. You know, we didn't have cell phones back then, but I'm, playing a movie in my head or whatever. Really wish I could go back in time and just tell my childish self to pay attention, absorb it, appreciate it, make the most of it. I feel like I'd have a great appreciation for it now at the age of 40. So I don't know. I'm interested in all that stuff. I appreciate all that stuff. I'm glad my aunt did it. Hindsight's 2020, but yeah, pretty special that she would take the time to do that. And she would kind of gather the troops, no pun intended, and make sure it was not optional. We all had to be there. We all had to sit through it. And it was cool. It was cool. I wish I would have done less giggling and more mental note taking.
I think we were all that way. I mean, when we were younger, I think even church was that way for a lot of us, where we didn't even want to sit still. We just kind of sat there and tried to occupy ourselves until it was over.
Yeah, and we'll never know then what we know now. We're never, 5 years ago, I was a different person than I am now. 5 years from now, I'll be a different person. So it's at least somewhat. So it is what it is. But yeah, wish I could convince my aunt to start doing those again. Oh, well.
I just kind of wanted to say something in reply to what Lamar was saying about, because I joined the Navy in 1974. I was a Vietnam era vet. And the thing is, it was tough for me, like adjusting to, like when people say now, like, thank you for your service, because if Vietnam era vets, like say we were spit on, we weren't even eligible for Montgomery era benefits when we got out. I mean, it was really tough being a veteran at that time. I mean, I think it took me like 20 years to finally get the disability that I needed because of that. I mean, even now, like for other benefits, you have to go either like Montgomeryville or 9/11. There's no place for us there, even in our benefits. I mean, we ride off of other ones, and it made it tough coming home and really settling in, because you have that, and like it's good now. Like, I mean, we love it when people are like, yeah, thank you for your service. But for those 10 or 15 years, right after Nixon brought the troops back, and everybody came home, it wasn't that way. It was really tough for us.
Do you think the impact of popular culture films like Born on the 4th of July, Good Morning Vietnam, and even like Forrest Gump, because it hits people, not just military folk, it hits people like me as well, that kind of, slaps us in the face and says, maybe this is not the way to talk to people. This is not the way. Their experiences were really impactful, and maybe we need to be a little bit different here. Do you think any of that stuff adjusts culture to where people are treated, especially, to those who served during Vietnam? This would be specifically more for you guys, but in general, do you think, because I know films, like, I'm an interior designer, I can't watch HGTV. It's horribly traumatically bad compared to what I do. And so I mean, I would never make maybe the association between the two, but I would just say, do you think things like, Forrest Gump in his military uniform in Washington, D.C. during Vietnam, during walking through a protest, and people talking and treating him in that way, do you think those visuals are impactful to people? Do you think they get it? And do you think it has changed society?
And I can't speak for all vets, right? And John, I appreciate you sharing that with us, brother. I mean, so
Yeah.
none of us will know. I mean, there was a lot of anguish, I guess, between, World War II was supposed to be the war that ended all wars.
Mhm.
Less than 10 years later, right, we find ourselves going into Korea, right? And then fast forward another 10 or 15 years, right? I mean, there's all these small little conflicts where we were sending our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines to go fight. And a lot of people, I think, question why, right? There was no direct reflection on U.S. soil or anything like that, right? As there was in World War II. So fast forward, here we are 40, 50, 60, 70 years later, right? And again, I can't speak for every vet, but I'll tell you what, although maybe some of that pop culture has come through to refine the perspective of U.S. citizens, I will tell you, it's the actions of our government that have helped refine my thoughts and beliefs as far as where we are. And often I doubt, right? I often question, why did I serve for 25 years based on where we are today, guys? I'm just going to be honest with you, right? And so, although the populace was driving John and them to try and say, I can't believe you did that, right? Or whatever they were trying to get you to believe, John, right? I will tell you, now the populace is kind of like, we accept veterans, but veterans themselves, guys, are suffering with the thought of what we've done for the last 15 to 20 years. Okay, I'm just going to be frank with you.
Yeah, and that gets into the whole thing about isolationism and global, which America's got a long, good history of isolationism, right? George Washington was like, don't get involved in all those European conflicts. And that lasted until World War I anyway. But you're right. There was a cultural thing. John, I went in the Navy in 77. So a few years after you, and it was still the post-Vietnam. I mean, I remember that, right? Budgets were horrible. I remember going out on a destroyer for a while, and I mean, it was drugs all over the place, and you still kind of had this. And where it kind of shifted in my experience and feeling, this is just my perspective, was in the 80s. Reagan comes in and basically says, we're going to turn a new page, right? And we're going to move on past that, and started funding things. People started getting treated better. The drugs came out. I don't know if you guys that aren't vets know it, and I assume it still goes on. There was a urinalysis thing, right? The whiz quiz. And if you pop positive, yeah, John's nodding. I saw Rodney a little bit. You pop positive. If you were a young enlisted guy, you got one shot to get rehabbed. If you were a chief like Rodney was, or an officer, first pop and you're gone, right? It was just done, out of there. And that really cleaned things up. I mean, A lot of the other little petty crimes and stuff went away. Funding was better. I mean, the public, all of a sudden you start having movies like Top Gun come out where, it was like, it was cool again, right? Whereas if you look at the 70s, the movies were things like The Deer Slayer, Platoon, I
But
mean,
do
just
do
kind
you
of
really feel like those,
art.
do you really feel like movies and television really influence the general populace as to the impact of how any of us generally think about military service and military veterans and those
Well, that I couldn't
think
speak on
absolutely we
because being a veteran, I mean, I had my own opinions that were much stronger than what Hollywood could give me. But I'll tell you, the depiction of people changed. Like if you look at the 70s, the people that served were still all, you got drafted, you were a poor, pathetic thing, and at best you were used and abused. By the 80s, it was like, no, you were a cool guy, man. You flew jets or whatever, right? Or like even Forrest Gump. Who looked bad in Forrest Gump? Was it Forrest Gump or were it all the moronic hippie protesters that were spitting on him and treating him bad, right? And that's what flipped. Because in the earlier movies, Forrest Gump would have looked bad. In the later movies, it's like, oh, the intolerant kind of bad attitude people were the hippies and all that kind of stuff, right? For the most part. So culture shifted.
Rita, do we have one more group?
Yeah, we do. So, not to cut everybody off, but we do have one last group, which would be 3 different breakout sessions. Group 1 would be share a funny story of military or first responder life. Number 2 would be, have you done overseas service? What was that like and did it change you? And then number 3 would be, how can civilians support those sacrificing for freedom?
And we get to pick again.
This
So-
has been fantastic so far, guys.
Yeah, there's
Thank
gonna be I mean, the rooms are gonna be pretty heavy, guys, so,
I've got to figure out how to pick a room.
all right. 1, 2, 3. Say them again, Rita. 1 was,
Oh, yeah, sorry. Oh my gosh, my agenda fell off my screen. Number 1 is share a funny story of military or first responder life. Number 2 is, have you done overseas service? What was that like and did it change you? And number 3 is, how can civilians support those sacrificing for freedom?
so if you're having a hard time getting in a room, tell me where you want to go and I will get you there. Oh, Lamar found out how to pick a room. Look at that.
Ronnie, what room are
wanna
you
go?
going to? Okay.
Rita, this is Lamar. How about picking on, I think it was room 2 about veterans, because the stories we shared about serving overseas are very different. And if we could each have like 30 seconds, I think it'd be fun.
Yeah, so, okay, so group 2, have you done overseas service? What was that like and did it change you? Who was in group 2 and who would like
Let's start with Andy, then go to John, and then go to Harvey. Go to JJ.
Okay, so my story was I didn't have assignments like I lived overseas, like the other guys did, like the Army, that's pretty common or whatever. I was on a submarine. So we would get forward deployed, we'd spend 6 months in the Med, or we'd go up north or something. But I remember the first one I went on was this Mediterranean cruise, and we had a submarine tender in La Maddalena in Sardinia where we get repaired and stuff like that. But it was my first time overseas. I was 21, 22, hadn't discovered myself by touring Europe or anything. And what an eye-opener that was. All the things we take for granted in the US, and it's followed me ever since. I've traveled a lot in my corporate life after the Navy, and how much, you just don't appreciate the freedoms that we have. Certainly the material wealth is a part of it. So many aspects of our culture, which are much more open. And I mean, it just got so that every time I've come back from then on, whether in the Navy or later, traveling for other reasons, it's just like you almost want to kiss the ground when you get off. I mean, I mean, you go to so many countries where you can't even drink the water. It comes out of the tap. It'll make you sick, kind of stuff, right? And not you know, first of all,
Yeah, you don't have to have military service to have done that.
Let's move over to John.
Like I was telling, I mean, my time overseas, it gave me a big sense of awareness about people. I mean, other countries and how we lived here and we're so locked into this. Oh my God, look at this and this, and this is going on. But once you go to other countries, it's a different ballgame. You know, like I said, like Andy said, this is wow. I mean, I never missed a McDonald's. Jack in the Box taco so much.
Oh, tacos are for real, friend. Yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, no, it's like my last 3 or 4 months, that's all I thought about. I want a Jack in the Box taco. And you love the food, but you're there and you're like, because I had the privilege of going to 4 different countries in 2.5 years. And you really, you appreciate the culture, you appreciate everything. And it's really eye-opening, but you see how the people live with all the things that we complain about. There's no assistance, there's no food stamps, there's no like government assistance. They're on their own. And so
Is there any prep for you guys when you go abroad? You know, do they ever tell you how things are going to be different or what to expect when you get to certain places? I asked that because I did a cruise that went to Havana, Cuba, and they were really good about telling us what to expect. And there was a percentage of Americans who got off my cruise ship, and that's not like military life. That was just a 1 day in port. But there were people who got off the boat with us who really did think the rules were the same and they could do whatever they wanted. And it's a communist country, so you cannot behave however you want. Do you feel like there were people who...
We always had a port brief, right? And anytime you pulled in prior to, first of all, you always had a forward deployed team that would go into the city, find out where all the red flag areas were and all that, or black flag areas, whatever you want to call them, right? They weren't good areas of the city. Or maybe they were.
Hey!
So that you know to go to them, right, Rodney?
That's right. Usually that was the first thing. They were like, wherever you
top 10 list.
Go to this area of the city, and we're all screenshotting the map to try and figure out, okay, where we got to go now, right? But yeah, there was always that, and then they would always have some official, usually a police officer or someone that was in charge of the police in that city that would come on board as well, that would kind of give us a rundown, right? That's kind of how, if they had someone authority like a law officer or something like that, you kind of knew that you can get in trouble, but you're probably not going to be stuck in a Italian prison or something like that, right? They're just going to turn you over to the MPs or whatever, right? And
well, let's ask JJ for his comment, because he had a couple of interesting tours. JJ?
Well, yeah. So to answer Rita's question, yes, they do, and then no, they don't. So when you first arrive in a new country, there's always a brief where they kind of tell you the different things to expect in that country. When I was stationed in Germany, they actually gave us a full class on that because we were going to be living there. They gave us a little cheat book with some common phrases and places to go near where we were and vacation spots and stuff like that. And I think there was a 3-day course, and we got a little fancy certificate to go along with it that really didn't mean much. I think most people probably threw it away on the way out the door. But when I would deploy to Iraq, they do that. They have a really big cultural brief, because when you're deployed to a combat zone in an area where they have a lot of different traditions and customs that you're not used to, you have to know that. Like, don't shake with your left hand, or there are many things that you just don't do, and they did a very good job showing you that. And by the way, if you ever go to the Middle East, the reason you don't do that is because, depending on where you're at, that's what they wipe with. So just keep that in mind. And
don't show the bottom of your shoe.
And don't show the bottom of your shoe. Correct.
Mhm.
Yes. But yes, they did a really good job with that. And I did do 3 combat tours to Iraq, and I had a 2.5-year tour over in Germany. And I didn't mention this in the group, but when I was stationed over in Hawaii, it was funny because my integration brief when I got on station with the commanding general and the command sergeant major was, your family will enjoy Hawaii. And then it was like a ... pause. And they said, I want to say it again. Your family will enjoy Hawaii. And so I was always traveling to planning conferences, doing training, and it was a great experience. But I mean, the family had a good time. I guess I did too. It would have been nice to go to all those awesome places in the Pacific and be able to take them with me. But yeah, it was interesting. Did it change me? I mean, obviously, well, not obviously, I guess, but I would say that anytime you're able to experience another culture, it teaches you something about the world, which also gives you a new perspective. And when it comes time to coming back and doing your day to day, when you have an understanding of another culture, you look at people a different way. And so that's very important when it comes to learning and influencing others and all of that stuff, because it kind of expands your mind a little bit.
Rita, could we go to group 1? Because we could go, I tell you, the 4 veterans that were in group 2, we could just talk forever, but we need to let the other groups talk.
So group 1 was share a funny story of military or first responder life. And, that includes police, fire, paramedics, anyone who's running the opposite way from when bad things happen, right? And I was in that group. Who else was in that group? I certainly think there were the stories, I mean, I think I shared one of my grandfather. He was probably rolling in his grave with me sharing this story, but we in the family think it's hysterical. He was a older draftee for World War II. He was like 30 years old when he was drafted, and he was in the Army Air Corps. He was sent to Bossier City, Louisiana from Akron, Ohio. He was the son of Hungarian immigrants. So he's sent from, Fort Climate, Akron to the barrels of hell in Louisiana. And he, being an older guy, had obviously worked in the rubber shops amongst various other things during the Great Depression. And one of the things he did was he had founded and had played in a lot of local pickup sporting games all around Akron in early football and basketball, things of that nature. And he took that with him when he went to the military, and he started apparently a rousing group of pickup games on base. My uncle at one point brought over a big box of military and photographs and just family history, and we started going through it. My grandfather, and my very unassuming grandfather, received a special commendation from the military for these sporting leagues that he started on base. It was so largely impactful that it decreased the amount of venereal disease on base during the months he had this. And it is no wonder nobody in the family knew about it, because it's not something a 30-year-old man would come home and tell him. No, people would now. It would be on Facebook, it would be whatever. But at the time, I'm sure, he came home at like 35 years old and married my grandmother. At 35, you would never have told your family about that. You would have just taken that paper, put it at the bottom of that box, and marched on with your life. But we find that, I think this was, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago. My oldest brother, who is a military man himself, he finds it, he frames it, and it's in his office today. So
You-
a little bit of humor there.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Well, my first boss in the Air Force got his Purple Heart for falling off a bar stool on a piece of shrapnel in Vietnam when it was shelled.
Wow.
That's one of those stories that you just can't make up.
Right.
No, and he's a good old boy from Kentucky too, so he had a good sense of humor, I guess.
I mean, even for those of you who weren't in group one, I mean, do you have any funny stories? You know, that's a great example of a funny story that's like, how did that happen? Anything you would like to share about, I love that. I love the stuff that is, there's the rules and regulations, and then there's what really happens in real life.
Well, I have a quick story. I was parachuting in the fall out of my obviously a good airplane. And we were trained that when your feet hit the ground, you started your parachute landing fall. Well, we hit the top of the corn that was 6 feet or 8 feet tall. By the time I hit the ground, I landed on my hip. So here I am limping off the field. And we may be running a little late. Do we want to switch over to the third group? I'm sorry, somebody's got their face here, really wants to speak. Is that you, Tim?
Oh, I can share this quick story. My grandfather back in World War II, during the time where the Germans were sinking a lot of our ships. I don't know if the draft had started yet or not, or maybe it was in process, but my grandpa came home and informed my grandma and my mom that he joined the Navy. And that sent grandma in a tiz, like, what the heck are you doing? He goes, well, I'm going to end up getting drafted and I don't want to go sleep in a mud hole in some ditch in Europe. So I'm going to have me a warm bunk, or at least I'll have a bunk on a ship. So he signed up for the Navy during that time frame, which was a little chaotic, but always reminds me when someone says people that run towards the problem, not away. I was like, yeah, he ran towards it. All right.
When I was just a few weeks ago when I was back in Pennsylvania, I had a chance to ask my 94-year-old uncle, hey, why'd you join the Navy? Like, why the Navy? And he almost the same thing, Tim, right? He was like, well, I knew my brothers had already been drafted and they were fortunate enough to go into the Navy. And I just figured, you know what? I don't want to be one of those guys in the green. So so he went in and enlisted into the Navy, right? And stuff. So listen,
Well,
we are short on time. The last group was about how we all can help support our veterans and stuff. And Scott brought up some great points. I'm just going to kind of paraphrase some stuff, right? There's this thing called honor flag, guys, that we do here in Ohio. I know Columbus has one, Cincinnati has one. Your major cities may have one as well, where basically you can sponsor a veteran. And Scott, please interrupt me if I'm saying it wrong, right? But you can basically sponsor a veteran, send them on this honor flight. That honor flight sends them to DC for a day, I think, or something like that, right? Where they get to go around and see all of the monuments and meet people and things like that. Go ahead, Scott.
And honestly, just to jump on to add on to that, outside of sponsoring the veteran, if you want to really get a firsthand experience of what these guys' service, men and women service and sacrifice means, sign up to be a guardian, where you're assigned one of the veterans to accompany the whole time. The range of emotions that you will witness, the stories you will get to overhear, they're better than any history book, movie, anything you're ever going to see or read. And I promise you, by the end of the day, you will be moved, you will be inspired, and you will be, if you're not already beyond grateful, it puts it at a whole nother level, the service and sacrifice that our men and women have provided this country so we can have the freedoms and liberties we have.
On that same kind of note, right, we got folks that are kind of up in the New England area and stuff as well, right? I know New York has a big Fleet Week every year, guys, right? Find a way to sponsor a sailor, right? You can sponsor a sailor and have them to your house and have them for dinner and take them around the city, or I would have never probably had been in the Navy had it not been for Lorraine Ohio. It's now, they passed it on to Cleveland now. I think Cleveland does it, but Lorraine, the town that I'm from, used to have Fleet Week. I happened to work at Lorraine Palace Civic Center, doing lights and sound and all kinds of different stuff for different shows and stuff that would come in. But my boss was the president of the Fleet Week Foundation, or Lakefront Foundation, right? So he asked me and one of my buddies from school to film everything that was going on that year when I can't remember the ship, but they came in. It was an amphibious ship that came in, and they did like this marine takeover of amphibious landing takeover of Lakeview Beach, and we filmed all of that. We were actually the first ones on board the ship, right? And filmed all of the mayor and everybody welcoming the ship. And then I got a chance to meet up with some sailors, right? Married sailors that were looking to go out and have a good time, but not looking to go out
And have that kind of a good time.
right? So I happened to be 16. I had a car. I drove, right? I took those guys back to my mom's house. She fed them like, I mean, Tim's been to my mom's house. He knows what I'm talking about, right? And so she feeds an army every day of the week, whether she has 3 or 50 there, right? And then we went out and just had a good time. And it was just an unbelievable opportunity for me as a young person to learn really what the Navy was and what it had to offer and things like that. And for families, it can be a great opportunity for you to come in and show that appreciation to our veterans that are out there. And I'm sure the Marines and the Army and the Airmen have a similar adopt-a service.
Rodney, can I add one thought to that? We've talked a lot about service members. The spouses of service members should also be remembered for the difference they made, okay? Particularly when their spouses have been deployed, how difficult it was to be a spouse, men or women, helping to raise children going to, in my case, 8 different schools between kindergarten and senior of high school. So we really should be thinking not just of the service members, but their spouses and significant family members.
Listen, my wife did not help to raise our kids. My wife raised our kids. Right?
Same.
She did.
Same.
For the first 11 years, she raised our kids. Right?
Well,
Exactly.
I want to put a plug in too, real quick before we get off. Let's not forget about some of those that are still serving, right? So there's a different problem that some of these guys that are still serving have, and they're not the active duty service members. They're the reserve and National Guard service members that get pulled away from the jobs that a lot of us work in on a day-to-day basis. So there are USERRA laws. You can all study these. These are the ones that protect that service member if they need to leave their job to go do training or to do things, to get deployed or whatever the case may be, and studying those and making sure you support those, and also looking into the local events that the ESGR, the Employer Support for the Guard and Reserve, put on, and supporting those things and making sure that you're just showing up for those service members that still have to balance a job and their service.
Awesome. And thanks for that, JJ. Hey guys,
Can you, Rodney, maybe send out after this meeting some of those resources and some of those ways we can support via email to the group?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I put the summary letter together, I will make sure I capture those in some kind of links and stuff so you guys have all of those, and then you guys can have that. Give it up for Rita and Lamar, please, for bringing this to the forefront, having great conversations.